It's on the 15th.
Okay, we're going to get started here.
There's 2 branch river meets on the 18th. Hold that in-
Today what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the outline and see what we've already learned and how much more we have to go. And you'll see that we've covered actually a great deal of the topics already. We're going to do just a couple new topics. One is called externalities, and these are examples of market failures, where people can either benefit or be hurt by things in the marketplace that they are not directly responsible for. And then how do we deal with these situations? Do we need to deal with these situations? And then the other new topic today will be looking at costs of production in a new way, looking at output versus input, the relationship there. And then we'll do some practice questions as well. All right. So up on the screen I have the outline for microeconomics. You should have gotten a copy of this at the beginning of the first review session. All of these things here in part 1, we learned in macroeconomics. We'll do some practice yet on comparative advantage, absolute advantage, terms of trade. That might be our key topic with next week. Marginal analysis, that is basically the looking at marginal costs and marginal revenue. We'll deal a little bit more with that today as well. But basically, economic systems, you've got traditional socialists or command and capitalist economies, and I think we talked about the pros and cons of each of those in macro as well. Then we've got markets, and this also is covered in AP Macroeconomics. So it's basically supply and demand. What are the 5 things that change demand? What are the 7 things that change supply? What happens to equilibrium when we shift the supply-demand curve? Very basic stuff. Price and quantity controls, price floors and price ceilings. So we learned about that. Elasticity. We spent a good deal of time with that, and some of our review questions will deal with that. Consumer surplus and producer surplus we looked at. And then tax incidence and deadweight loss were part of that as well. So we learned all about this. One of the few things that we still need to look at is part B here, total utility and marginal utility. Production and costs we're going to look at today. And then part D, firm behavior and market structure, that's what we've done the last couple of weeks. Looking at how do we analyze the market in a monopoly, an oligopoly, monopolistic competition, and perfect competition. Part 3, which is basically the labor side of things, hiring labor and capital. We'll have to spend a little bit of time with that. And then today we're going to be spending a few minutes with market failure and the role of government. But that's it. You've already learned probably, at least by the end of today, I would say 3/4 of the topics already for the AP Microeconomics exam. All right. So that's where we're going. We're going to look at this right now. Externalities. You know what GRB stands for? And specifically, what part of Green Bay or what feature? The airport. It's the call-letters or whatever.
Technically, it's KGRB.
Yeah.
That's the international one.
Right, yeah. Okay.
People fly internationally
Nice.
through Green Bay.
So Austin Straubel International Airport.
No, if they call it international airport, if it has customs at, so like where you can't come in from an international country into Appleton
There's a McDonald's restaurant on Packer Land well, it's about half a block off 172.
Right by runway 2.
And let's imagine that airport, that McDonald's has been there forever, a long period of time. When Austin Strobel Airport increases its passengers, when more people use it, when it becomes an important, even more important transportation hub for Green Bay, more people will go to McDonald's, right? Its location is very advantageous. So, income goes up for McDonald's. What did McDonald's do to earn that additional income?
Absolutely
Nothing. Now, we can argue, well, they may have made a good location choice, but if we work under the assumption, let's say that they've been there for a long time and didn't really expect a huge jump in passengers, and we saw that, it was just really, I guess, luck that they benefited in that way. So, what percentage of its profits will McDonald's send to Brown County to reward Brown County for locating their airport next to McDonald's?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely none. That's right. So this is an example of a positive externality. This is when a company benefits from an economic decision that they do not make. They did not make any economic decision here today. Okay? Another thing that's near Austin Strobel Airport used to be Trudy's house. My colleague here in the Southwest Social Studies Department.
I live near the airport.
Hmm?
The flight path for the east-west runway goes right over my house.
Negative
Okay.
externalities because the sides of the house were ripped off.
Not ripped off, but
Damaged.
Trudy had a difficult time selling her house a few years ago because her house, which was located fairly close to one of the runways, had become discolored because of the fumes, the jet fuel, the residue in the air. So, she had difficulty selling her home, and, it hurt the value of her home. And again, if we work under the assumption, whether or not it's completely true or not, that this home had been there a long time, either before the airport was built or before the airport was as heavily used as it is today, she did not really have any knowledge ahead of time that this would have happened. How much help will Trudy get from Austin Strobel Airport to help sell the house,
Probably
or
not much.
nothing? Nothing. And so this would be an example of a negative externality.
Makes sense.
Okay. Now, yes, all the time we have situations where businesses either benefit, luck out, or don't luck out based on things that are somewhat out of their control. That's just life. But the point is that this is a key example of what's called a market failure. And a market failure then is any situation in which the price of a product does not accurately reflect all costs, or the costs have been shifted from one party to another in an unplanned or unfair, possibly, way. In the first example with McDonald's, they, in this case actually, I guess, reflect all costs or benefits. Because with a positive externality, we're talking about benefits. They got some benefits that were shifted to them that they didn't necessarily earn based on their business decisions. And then with Trudy's house, the costs were shifted to her in a way that, you know, the price of the house should have been higher. All right. Other examples of market failures. So what are some other examples where the costs or benefits have not been fully accounted for? How about Fort Howard Paper Company? Which is now the Georgia Pacific plant on Broadway and Lombardy. So it's the large paper mill, the large Georgia Pacific facility with the two big smokestacks on the river, not too far from here. For years, this company, along with like a dozen other along the Fox River, put chemicals, PCBs, into the Fox River. And these are chemicals that were from a special type of paper, you know, waxy or carbon paper or something like that. I'm not sure. And so this chemical that was released into the river, of course, is the reason why still today we have the dredging, we have people, you know, don't really swim in the Fox River. In Green Bay, it's getting a little bit better. They're talking about maybe trying to open up Bay Beach as an actual swimming facility, a real beach, once again, because it's improving. But still, we're a ways away from that. The reason were the PCBs. So let's say the PCBs go into the, I don't know if they were used for toilet paper. Let's say it was toilet paper.
I thought it was wax paper.
Yeah. But we all have a bit more personal experience with toilet paper than we do with wax paper, hopefully.
You don't like with wax.
No. Okay. So,
Touche.
the cost of dealing with this is, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars that's being spent to clean this up. Were those hundreds of millions of dollars part of the cost, the price of toilet paper that was sold to consumers over decades? No, that cost was not part of this. Had the society and Fort Howard Paper Company fully accounted for the cost that they were incurring by polluting the environment, the price of that toilet paper would have been
Much higher.
higher, perhaps much higher. But they skirted that, and in order to keep the price of their paper product down. But now, after the fact, we have these costs. They're being held responsible because the government sued them and other companies, but still, the government's also incurring a lot of costs with this. This is another example of a market failure, where the price of the product does not fully include all the costs that went into producing that at the time. Another market failure is something called a public good. A public good is something that all may use, but it's impossible to charge people.
So you're talking like for gum or something like that?
Air.
No.
You can charge people for gum. If you don't pay
Or
for
you
gum,
talk-
you ain't getting gum.
Or are you talking like air, like?
We're talking more like clean air being an example, yeah. If society spends millions, billions of dollars improving air quality, and Sam doesn't pay his taxes because he doesn't agree with this use of taxpayer funds, can we deny Sam the benefit of the clean air that's generated?
Yes.
No, we can't.
Throw him in
He
prison.
can still benefit from that. Everybody benefits from that. Even other countries like China, if they don't improve their air, but we do, the Chinese will benefit from overall cleaner air across the globe. Okay? So, you know, even though, again, you say, that's just the way it is, this is a market failure because we're not adequately able to charge people for this. Yeah, we're gonna put it, instead of oxygen tank, we're gonna put old dirty air from China and then force Santa to breathe that because he didn't pay his taxes. No, we can't do that. Same thing with national defense. If Darren doesn't pay his taxes, which goes towards, part of it goes towards national defense, are we gonna allow the Koreans to bomb his house? Are we going to deny him national defense? No, we're not. He's gonna benefit from the same protections as everybody else. So these are examples of public goods. Sunlight is a public good. We get the benefits from it, but there's nothing that we do necessarily to buy it, to earn it. It's kind of a free thing, it's free. So these are public goods. Technically, again, they are market failures. Is there any way with any of these market failures that we can correct the market? Can we balance out the benefits and costs among the people that deserve to pay those costs or earn those benefits?
In terms of taxes, it would be a use-based tax instead of a general tax.
What are we taxing? Use of what?
Something that adds pollutants to the air.
Okay. So maybe that'd be a reason to have gas taxes, which we do. Yeah, well, every state has gas tax, you know, a certain percentage of that gallon of gas you put in your car is that tax, that excise tax. Some of it can be used to maybe discourage people from driving so much. Some of it can be, you know, to actually try to balance out the costs and benefits of society. Regulation, government regulation of business could be considered a way to correct a market failure. For example, if we had had stricter anti-pollution standards in place back in the 40s, 50s, 60s when paper companies were polluting the rivers, then yes, toilet paper would have cost more, but then we would have had a more accurate market price of what it really should be in that case. So government is the institution that can come in to try to correct market failures. There are some things that are basically impossible to correct, like the public goods, unless you try to twist people's arms by putting them in jail for not paying their taxes or whatever, to try to prevent people from skirting their taxes in the first place. But you can have regulation, you can have use-based taxes, you can have government try to do some things to balance out the market. Any questions about externalities or market failures? I guess the other thing that you'll have to think about is what will this look like on a graph? So if this is the market for toilet paper, had government back in the 50s been more aware of the PCD problem and had been putting more regulations in place for companies, how would that impact supply or demand of toilet paper?
Demand would move left.
Demand to the left?
To the right.
I think
I'm thinking the price
supply-
level.
Think about the 5 reasons for a change in demand and the 7 reasons for a change in supply.
Price level's gonna go up, so something has to happen to raise the price level.
Mhm.
The supply would go left because they can't make as much because they can't dump all the excess stuff into the water.
Yeah. And sure enough, you might recall, one of the 7 reasons for a change in supply is government regulations. So this would be an example of government regulations shifting supply curve to the left, and then we have a higher price. Price goes from P1 up to P2. So that's a way that you could graph this out.
Where are the other 6?
Cost of inputs, taxes and subsidies, we have government regulations, we have expectations of future price, number of suppliers.
You're on a roll, keep going.
They have to do with costs.
Cost of inputs.
We got that one. Shoot, what are we missing?
We'll
There's
come
two
back
more.
to it.
Wait,
Okay.
I think I still have my cards.
Let's move on.
Okay, okay. Now, if instead what about the other idea that was given? We're going to tax usage, let's say of gasoline.
Technology.
Technology and efficiency are the other two, thank you, yes.
Wait. Yeah.
So if we're gonna increase the price of gasoline by adding a higher tax on there, how would that change the situation?
Wait, did you say raise taxes or lower?
We're gonna raise the tax, which will effectively raise the price of gasoline for the consumer.
Just people cut back in their driving.
I agree.
The one thing you can't do here is you're not gonna be shifting the supply curve to the left. Because who's getting taxed? It's not the gasoline company, the oil company, it's the consumer. So really, we're gonna be increasing the price.
EPA just changed the regulations on petroleum, so all sulfur has to be removed. Like diesel fuels now, so expect the prices to go up.
Well, it's gonna be a little bit more complex in this situation. And this has to deal with, again, consumer surplus, producer surplus, tax incidence, deadweight loss. I don't know if those things ring a bell, but it's a little bit more complex. With the higher regulations on the firm, we can definitely simply shift our curve here and very easily, quickly figure out what's gonna happen here. This one, where it's gonna be going towards the consumer, we'll take a look at that situation more closely next week. Okay, and then finally, this is called the theory of production. And it concerns the relationship of inputs versus outputs. As you put more inputs into a company, for example, workers, what do we expect is going to happen to total output? This is related a little bit to some of the curves we've been looking at with different market structures. So let's have inputs here and outputs there. And our inputs, let's just keep it simple and look at workers. The number of workers that you have hired for your company. Output will be the number of iPhones that are produced by those workers. Okay. With no workers, no iPhones, right? So that's probably going to be 0. Now, imagine with the first worker, we do finally get one iPhone made, but just one, because remember, one person, you're not gonna be at division of labor. You have one person who's gonna do all the different steps of the process. It's gonna take a very long time. But at least we got one iPhone produced. 2, we didn't just double, we quadrupled output because now you can have division of labor. Let's say after 3 workers, we have 10 iPhones. We add the 4th worker. $18 iPhones are produced. The 5th worker, 24. And you add the 6th worker, your output is 23.
It's called that 6th guy was lazy and inefficient. And it brought everybody else's work down.
So,
He stole one.
so now let's graph this. We have output over here on the y-axis and input on the x-axis. We have 0 and 0. So
Inventory.
we're going to go up to 6, and then it's about 30.
It's risk.
So 10, 20, 30. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So 0 and 0. Then we had 1 and 1.
Mr. Kramer, you good at geometry?
That was okay. 2 and 4.
Well, we know we got an
3 and 10. 4 and
He's very good at drawing graphs. It's just,
5
Microeconomics.
and
usually there's a correlation between people that can do with geometry and graph drawing.
something like this, okay?
Very
This is called the production
possibilities for
function.
I actually.
And so the output is a function of the input. The number of iPhones produced is a function, in this case, of the number of workers you have producing, okay? Look at the slope. From 0 to 4 workers, so in here,
Changing wire, changing 18.
how would you describe the slope as we keep adding workers? What's happening to our output?
4.5 iPhones.
Decrease.
per worker.
Well, we add, with the first worker, we added 1 unit of output. The second worker, we added
3.
3.
Well, it's decreasing until a point of inflection.
With the third worker, we added,
6.
okay, fourth one, 8, yeah. So, as we are adding input, as we're adding workers, not only are we increasing total product, total production, but it's increasing at an increasing rate, or on the margin. So this is going to be marginal product. Marginal product is increasing as we increase our input of workers. So this is definitely a good place. You want to keep adding inputs, but this is a good place to be. So like this, and this is stage 1. That's stage 1 of the production function, and it's called increasing returns. Okay. But something happened. Darren reacted to this. When we added our 5th worker, we still increased iPhone production, however, only by +6. So this is stage 1. This is going to be stage 2, which is called decreasing returns. It's decreasing, it's Sorry, I meant
Is it diminishing?
Diminishing returns. It's still increasing, but by a smaller amount
And
than
the
it was
next one is
before.
decreasing.
Sorry, okay. So then this is stage 2. And then in the 6th worker, we actually dropped 1. And that's going to be called stage 3, decreasing returns. Now, the question then becomes, how is it possible that by adding another worker, you actually decrease your output?
Still one.
No, he didn't steal one.
He's less efficient and it brings down the efficiency of the entire work.
Yeah, and it wasn't just, so even if he was lazy, it wasn't just that he didn't do anything, but something that he was doing was lowering the overall efficiency,
Counterproductive.
you know. So maybe it's that he was a jokester and now people are just distracted. Maybe he is more likely, it's just kind of in the way, maybe we have like too many cooks in the kitchen. You ever heard of that? Sometimes you get too many voices, too many hands, that you start to have more conflict. It's harder to make decisions because more people are trying to have a say and trying to make decisions or to have their say in there. Maybe it's simply physical. You know, like if maybe you have a very small factory, people are literally starting to get in each other's way, running into each other, not enough personal space to work in a small factory. This can definitely happen with capital as well. You know, imagine that you're cutting down trees and we have 10 people in this plot of land and you give them no axes. Well, you're not going to get very many trees cut down, right? Give them one axe and you'll start to cut down a lot more trees with that first axe, but you'll still have a lot of people sitting around without an axe cutting down trees. It's going to go slow. But eventually you increase the capital. This is called capital deepening. You actually can generate a great deal more output with everybody having an axe. But at some point, if you have 100 axes lying around with 10 people, again, this is a silly situation, but this is the theory, is now you're going to have people that are trying to avoid the axes, people who are stepping on axes. You have too much capital. And you might not necessarily chop your hand off because there's extra axe lying, or you probably find a way to deal with this. Still, you're no longer going to be benefiting and maybe even possibly reducing a little bit your overall output because you've maximized your capital too much. That definitely might take place with labor too. All right. So the theory of production basically states that there are these 3 stages. Stage 1, as you add more input, the output increases at an increasing rate. In stage 2, you start to slow down. It's still a good idea to probably add workers or inputs because you're still adding overall product, but your marginal product is starting to slow down, it's starting to come down. And in stage 3, you definitely don't want to be in because you now are in decreasing returns. So the question is, all other things being considered, where would a company want to be? And the answer would be somewhere in stage 2, somewhere up there. But you definitely want to stop adding inputs before you get into that stage 3. You do not want to go there because then you're adding cost and losing revenue. Okay? Any questions about the theory of production? All right, then we can do some review questions. We're not going to do all of them. Here are the ones I'd like to do today. 1 and 2 are simple. Let's see if you can remember. Do number 3. Do number 6. 7. I'm gonna skip the easy ones. 10. 12. 14. 'Let's do that for right now. So 3, 6, 7, 10, 12, and 14.